The plane was ready for takeoff, its engines humming quietly in the background, and passengers were lining up to board. Everything was going routinely until a woman appeared at the airport, dressed in an elegant but slightly worn pilot's uniform. She wore a navy blue blazer, a cap with a wing emblem, and a shoulder bag the same one she'd carried for over a decade of flights. Her name was Emily Matthews. Emily wasn't just any pilot. She had 17 years of experience, thousands of flight hours, certifications from 3 continents, and a reputation as one of the best in the business. But that morning, none of it mattered. As she approached the crew check-in, the new shift manager, a young, overzealous man named Ryan Chase, looked down on her and said coldly, "Excuse me, ma'am, but please wait outside. You're not in the system." Emily frowned. "I'm the captain of Flight 187 to Oslo. My documents are current, and I'm on the roster. We can clear this up in 2 minutes." But Ryan just shrugged. "Please don't cause trouble. We're on a tight schedule today, and the pilot slot is already filled. Step aside." This wasn't the first time Emily had been treated this way. Since SkyVista Airlines had been taken over by a new owner and began restructuring, experienced employees like her had been slowly pushed out. First, they took away her long-haul flights. Then her schedule was changed without notice. And now, she was told to wait outside like she was nobody. She stood silently for a moment, not out of shock, but because she already had a plan. A plan that had been forming for weeks, ever since she uncovered something that could bring SkyVista down for good. Without a word, Emily turned and left the terminal. But not to go home. She got into a car parked in the distance and pulled a thin, steel briefcase from her bag. Inside were dozens of documents, photos, and emails, everything she had gathered over the past months with the help of a former air traffic controller named Oliver Stone, who had quietly sent her data from the airline's internal systems. What they had discovered was shocking. SkyVista had been cutting corners on aircraft maintenance, falsifying technical reports, and pressuring pilots to fly with reported defects. Emily had filed several complaints, none were addressed. Everything was swept under the rug. But today there was no turning back. Sitting in the car, she called investigative journalist Danielle Summers, with whom she'd been in contact for weeks. "Do you have everything I sent you?" she asked. "I do. I'm in a police cruiser with the district attorney. We're heading to the airport." 15 minutes later, the skies over SkyVista's terminal filled with sirens. Federal agents, civil aviation inspectors, and journalists with cameras stormed the facility. Passengers were evacuated. All flights were suspended. The board of directors was locked in the conference room. And Emily? She stood by the roadside, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold with cool composure. She knew her career as a pilot might be over. But she also knew something more important. She had saved hundreds of lives and ended the reign of an airline that had long played dirty. Then her phone rang again. This time it wasn't Oliver, Danielle, or an official. "Captain Matthews? This is the CEO of one of Europe's largest airlines. We heard what you did. We'd like to invite you to a meeting." And so one chapter ended and another, far greater, began. The meeting was set to take place in Milan, in the executive suite of Altavia Air, one of the most prestigious airlines in Europe. Emily had no idea what to expect. Was the invitation serious or just a PR move? One thing was certain. She couldn't ignore it. 2 days after SkyVista collapsed, Emily arrived at the airport as a passenger this time. People recognized her instantly. Some whispered with admiration. Others took pictures. Someone even handed her a rose and said, "Thank you for your courage." It was surreal. Most of her career had been spent behind the scenes, behind the controls, invisible. Now, her face was on the covers of newspapers, and her name appeared in CNN and BBC reports. But Emily didn't let the fame distract her. She knew the industry still needed fixing. At Altavia's office, she was received with respect, though there was tension in the air. The airline's CEO, Leonard Ferretti, was known for playing hardball. But this time, his approach was different. "Emily, we need you," he said without pleasantries. "Not as a pilot, as Director of Aviation Safety and Ethics. We want you to help us build an airline that actually cares about people, not just profits." Emily paused. Why me? Leonard gave a small smile. Because you're the only one in this business who didn't run from responsibility. And you didn't break. The offer wasn't just prestigious, it was a chance to change the game. Emily agreed, but under one condition: full independence and unrestricted access to conduct internal investigations. Leonard didn't hesitate. Weeks later, Emily stepped into her new role. Her first action? A full technical audit across all Altavia bases. The second? Mandatory ethics training for senior staff. Some tried to dismiss her. Others openly resisted. But her reports were sharp, and the way she stood her ground against high-paid executives earned her deep respect. One day, a leaked video surfaced of the former SkyVista CEO, the same man who ignored her complaints, being let out in handcuffs. Emily made no public comment, but the calm smile she gave at the press conference said it all. Then, something unexpected happened. Letters started pouring in. From young female pilots, from flight attendants, from technicians, people who had stayed silent out of fear for their jobs. They thanked her for breaking the silence and proving that change was possible. One letter touched her deeply. It came from Maya, a 23-year-old flight school graduate from a small town, who wrote, "When they told you to leave the terminal, I was on the verge of giving up on my dream. But then I saw what you did. And I realized, if I want to be a pilot, I don't have to be invisible." Emily set the letter down, stood, and looked out the window at the runway. This wasn't the end of her fight. This was just the beginning of a revolution. When Emily Matthews became Director of Safety and Ethics at Altavia Air, many assumed it was just a PR stunt, a trendy move. But Emily had other plans. Within 3 months, she conducted a full audit of every operational unit. What she found was alarming. SkyVista wasn't alone in cutting corners. Similar, though less obvious, practices were happening at Altavia too. Procedures were ignored. Female pilots were treated as oddities or worse, as threats. Emily didn't shout. She didn't fight with fists. She did what she did best: worked methodically, precisely, with the quiet strength that couldn't be shaken. As internal reforms rolled in, she gained not only respect but also enemies. One morning, as she prepared to present a new training program for female pilots, her laptop was wiped clean. The files deleted, flagged as unauthorized and potentially dangerous. She wasn't surprised. She was ready. She had backups, firewalls, and a team of loyal colleagues she'd earned not with titles, but with fairness, fearlessness, and respect. A few days later, she called a closed meeting with the board. Inside, she presented security footage and computer logs. They clearly showed sabotage by the Deputy Director of Operations, a man who had long seen Emily as a threat to order. He was terminated immediately. But that was just the beginning. After a year, Emily pitched a bold idea to Leonard Ferretti: launch a sister airline built on equality, integrity, and innovation. They called it Aurora Sky. For the first time in European aviation, a woman wasn't just the face of the brand, she was its heart. Emily became CEO. But it wasn't about the position. It was about the mission. She established mentoring programs for aspiring female pilots. Each candidate received training, mental health support, and financial aid. Aurora Sky paid for flight school in exchange for a few years of service. She also ensured crews were diverse, and that diversity was celebrated, not feared. In one of her first interviews, she said, "They say the sky is for everyone. But for years it wasn't. I want a little girl in a small town to look up and know she doesn't just have a chance. She belongs there." In 2 years, female enrollment in flight schools across Europe rose by 420%. Aurora Sky was named the EU's safest new airline. One of their ads, a little girl drawing planes, then sitting in a cockpit with the line, "Pilot isn't a dream." The plan went viral. Airports began posting banners. "Flying with Aurora? You know who's in the cockpit. Brave, experienced, ready." Some still tried to silence her, claiming it was a passing trend. But Emily had changed more than stats. She had changed the tone in which people spoke about women in aviation. She had changed what courage meant. On one flight, She sat next to a nervous young pilot on her first flight. The girl looked at her, eyes wide, and asked, "Weren't you scared that day? At the airport?" Emily smiled gently. "I was scared every day, but I was more afraid of what would happen if I did nothing."
Aurora Sky grew faster than anyone expected. New routes, hundreds of hires, record passenger satisfaction. Emily Matthews became an icon not just in aviation, but across the business world. But the bigger the success, the longer the shadow from the past. On an evening, after speaking at an international aviation conference in Amsterdam, Emily returned to her hotel room. On the table lay a white envelope, no sender, no markings. Inside, a single photo. Her. On a runway. But not a recent one. It was from 20 years ago. Back when SHE was a 21-year-old intern involved in one of the most tragic regional aviation incidents ever, an accident still surrounded by mystery. The official story blamed system failure. But Emily knew the truth. SHE had seen documents that were never reported. SHE knew WHO forced her into silence back then. Liam Orson Skyvista as former technical director. Now seemingly off the radar, but secretly active in shady airline deals in the Middle East. Soon after Emily announced Aurora Sky's next expansion phase, Liam called her. The conversation was short. Calm. Too calm. Congrats on your success. But if anything about 2007 rok comes out, you disappear. And so does your pretty little airline. It wasn't a threat. It was a delayed death sentence. Emily sat in the dark. For a moment, SHE wasn't the confident leader, just that young girl who had signed a silence clause to keep her license. But SHE wasn't alone anymore. And SHE wouldn't back down. With help from Daniel Summers, the same journalist who helped her expose Skyvista, Emily did something no one expected. At the annual gala of the European Aviation Federation, in front of hundreds of officials, cameras, and leaders, SHE took the stage and told the whole story. Not just Skyvista as sabotage. Not just the cover UPS. But the truth about the 2007 rok crash. With tears in her eyes but strength in her voice, SHE said. I stayed silent because I was told silence was the price of a place in the cockpit. Today, I know the truth shouldn't be a luxury. It should be the standard. The room went silent. Then exploded with applause. That very day, the European Transport Commission reopened the 2007 rok investigation. Liam Orson's name returned to the headlines, this time with an arrest warrant. Sometime later, Emily retired not out of fear, but because SHE knew SHE had done what SHE came to do. Aurora Sky kept flying, led by the team SHE had trained. Her story became part of aviation school curriculums. And on Airbus A320 cockpit wall, a plaque read. Captain Emily Matthews, the woman who raised the sky to a higher level. On her final flight, Emily wasn't the pilot. SHE was a passenger. Sitting beside her was Maya, the same girl who had once written her a letter. Now in uniform, licensed, with a fire in her eyes. Ready for takeoff? Maya asked. Emily looked at the sunrise through the window and replied. Always was. And the plane soared into the sky.